I know that we have a mixed crowd of attendees signed up. So welcome to everybody. Guten Morgen, guten Nachmittag. I do feel that we should make this webinar in English because we had a couple of registrants from the United States. The slides we had prepared are in German. On behalf of the German American Business Association, as well as from Bridge House Law, welcome to our September webinar. The German American Business Association was founded in the year 2012 with the intent to help German American businesses to flourish and to learn more details about how to run a company in the United States. A special shout out to a couple of our past participants of GABA. I've seen on the registration list, we have a couple of long-term friends. Schönen guten Tag, viele Grüße nach Deutschland, Bayern und andere ehemalige Teilnehmer. Viele Grüße und ich freue mich auf ein baldiges Wiedersehen. So, the idea of today's webinar is to give you a quick bird's eye view in the next 30 minutes or so about what it is in the product liability world, and please make sure that you have questions, because at the end of the day, you need to take something home, so your questions are valuable. And if you do have questions, please send the questions over to the chat function. And as always with those seminars, I'm very proud to have written a book this summer. This book is ready, and at the end of the webinar, I will ask a magic question, and the first one who answers the question correctly will get a free copy of this book signed by the author. So if you would like a copy, otherwise let me know and we can arrange that as well. But right now the game is answer the question and you get the book, but you need to be the first one. The concept of product liability boils out to be covering two different questions. Number one, what is the real story of the products? And the second question about the product is, how can you avoid your liability in case of a scenario that the product has a defect? So the traditional setting is that a product is full of mistakes if it satisfies one of three different criteria, which is it needs to have a wrong design, meaning it was made wrong. Made wrong as in the engineer designed it without knowing what is the current state of the art, what is the current knowledge level, what is the current best practice. Number two could be if it was wrongfully manufactured, if there was an error in the production. And my grandfather always used to say that when he bought a new car, he made sure the car was not manufactured on a Monday. He called it der Montagswagen, because he believed once everybody in the factory came back to work on a Monday, they were still in the dreamland of the weekend, and therefore cars made on Monday are more likely to be a problem. So he swore to make sure that you don't buy a Montagswagen. Modern manufacturing guidelines makes no difference. 24/7 production in certain industries make also no difference. But still, the error in the production is something, so you can fix that with a proper way of checking, of quality control, and you name it. And the third problem are, do we have any wrong warning? Do we have any wrong labelings? Or do we have anything in the whole way how the product is presented where the warning advice is not properly attached to? So let's take a plain good old fan. This plain good old fan looks pretty standard. However, it could be designed in a wrong way, where this design would be wrong if it was made in a way that it does not fulfill the typical minimum standards of the consumer. So between the risk and the advantage of a product, the law seems to err on side of reducing the risk and making sure your product is not a risk for your customers. So when is that the case? When is a product creating a risk? For example, if the material was used, which is not the current best materials possible, or the production had an error. What we see more and more is that during a production that the product is being checked for problems, sometimes even through systems of X-rays, through systems of MRIs, or things which we know from the human body. We have seen technology being implemented with laser checking of the product. All of this is a way to reduce the risk of a later liability in case of any errors in the production. The next topic is, do you put all the proper warning stickers on? And the proper warning stickers are the warning stickers you may know from the car. When you flip down your visor, you get certain advice about how it is with the airbags. When you look into the mirror, you all know that objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. And this is all a part of make sure that the proper warning is also on the product. And because we talked about a fan earlier, let's talk about a couple of warning labels you can put on a fan blade. And most important in those warning labels is that you have clear language and clear instructions. Keep away from moving fan blades would be a very clear way of saying that. Or you could say the other way around, rotating fan blades can cause serious injury. So all of this is important. I do not have a real preference between the upper and the lower one, as long as it is very clear that you should keep your hand or objects away. So moving over to a little more practical approach, and we all like cases, and sometimes it's good to have cases when you are ready to analyze, is my product really that bad? So let me share a couple of cases of the past years about product liability. The one case which I want to share with you today is the so-called Sacramento Kings. So about 11 years ago, professional basketball players with the Sacramento Kings had a problem because an explosion happened, but this explosion was caused by a rubber ball. And at the end, both Mr. Garcia as well as the Sacramento Kings filed a lawsuit against the manufacturer of this plastic ball for $4 million of loss of salaries, as well as roughly $30 million in pain and suffering. So you may wonder, is this a good number? Is it worth 20, 30 million? And if we were in a nice room together, which we intentionally have scheduled for a place in Berlin, where we had scheduled on behalf of the German American Business Association to have a workshop about product liability right now in Berlin. So if I were in a room, I would say, please raise your hand. I'm not sure how we can do it on the technology side, but do you believe that the Sacramento Kings got money out of that? Do you believe Francisco Garcia got money out of that? So do we have a liability, yes or no? And the question is, we really don't know. At the end, the parties settled this matter, and how this matter was settled, we don't know, because the content of this is sealed from the public, because the parties agreed to not share the details. So what we see here is there is a problem, there is a solution, and for the problem, the explosion of the ball, the solution was to come to a settlement, which leads to my next thought, that of the cases presented in the product liability world, 97% come to a result with a settlement. 3% only go to trial. 97% are settled. What is the problem with the right warning? And if you have the proper warning on your product, you may avoid liability. So one would think. Blitz USA was a manufacturer of portable gas canisters. And certain consumers had a problem, as it appears to be that there was an explosion, that there was fire coming out because Blitz forgot to implement a certain piece in this manufacturing process. And Blitz argued, well, we had all the labels added on. However, there were more 11 deaths reported, over 1,200 hospitalizations needed. And at the end, the question is now again, do you believe that Blitz was liable for this product? And rather than say yay or nay, try to share that in the chat, even though I cannot see it. What are your thoughts here? And Robert Spivey will read them out later. So this matter, again, was settled. Why am I not surprised about that? Unlike the other matter, we now know what happened, and Blitz agreed to pay $161 million. However, this whole lawsuit resulted that Blitz had to shut down the operation in 2012 as they were not able to pay the rising insurance costs for the company. If we move on to the discussion why products are problematic, one can only keep in mind that the design of a product is certainly reason for discussion. But also the attachment of a certain label is relevant. And we all know the case where the, at that time, 97-year-old Stella Liebeck poured coffee over herself. While she poured coffee over herself, she did what is more customary in the United States. She then filed a lawsuit against McDonald's. The full and true story is, of course, not that she turned around and filed a lawsuit, but that she demanded that some of her medical expenses would be paid by McDonald's. And over the discussion about that, the group, the lawyer representing Stella Liebeck, got frustrated, and she decided to cut it off and to file a lawsuit. The problem is not that the coffee was hot. The problem is that Stella Liebeck, as an almost 80-year-old female, had to be hospitalized for 8 days. She had to go through some skin grafts, and it was a 30-degree burn. And those who are experienced in the medical world know that 30-degree burns may create a deadly outcome. So in other words, it is not just hot coffee, it is a hot, deadly product. So after McDonald's got the demand for getting medical expenses for $11,000, the lawsuit was then filed. And we all know what happened, right? You all heard it. And when I ask this question, what is the outcome? I get sometimes very funny numbers, and some tell me this was multiple millions being paid, right? Caution, hot was missing. However, the parties, again, resulted in a settlement. So while the jury said this money is worth $2.7 million, however, the court later reduced the amount to $640,000. And after that, the matter was put into an appeal and the parties came into a settlement agreement. We don't know what settlement is. It is likely to be less than $640,000. So is it $200,000? Is it $300,000? We still do not know. Compare that with an $11,000 payment demand for medicals. Compare that with a daily revenue of $1.3 million in coffee. So the revenue as well as the liability together makes me wonder, what did the company not implement from a risk management protocol? So if we have 30-degree burns on the one hand, and if we have $11,000 and comparing that with 1.3 million, it is to be expected that something like that will occur. So my wish for you and the ask for a takeaway is, keep in mind that the early risk avoidance may be the best strategy. Be proactive, talk to somebody who complains rather than forcing them to go the legal route, may be the better way to reduce your risk. But did you ever wonder, why did McDonald's have to pay? What is the real reason? And the real reason is that the product appeared to have a problem as the product was sold too hot. And for some reason, the slide is now one too fast, and I'm trying to go back one slide. Okay, so that's the slide I want to have. So the product was considered to be a problem because the degree of coffee served was much hotter than it was from competing companies. I have picked up some stories why McDonald's served the coffee hotter than competitors. And I believe both stories are compelling. So you are the judge now. You tell me which of the stories is more convincing to you. The number one argument is that we have a couple of waterborne bacteria, and some waterborne bacteria likes it to be in a certain warm atmosphere, but not too hot. So if you push the temperature of the coffee to be a little bit hotter than it should be, the risk of having waterborne bacteria in your product is slower. So in a way, there is a good idea why McDonald's may have used this idea to higher the temperature. The second argument I picked up on occasion was that McDonald's did a market study, and they came down that the typical consumer needs 10 minutes to consume the coffee. If that's the case, we need to make sure, so the thought process internally, that when the consumer drinks the coffee is still hot, because nobody likes cold coffee, unless, of course, it's an iced coffee if you have a little bit of vanilla ice cream in that. So whether it was for McDonald's fear for bacteria or whether it was for the fear of having cold coffee being in front of the consumer, we don't know. But the fact is that McDonald's coffee at that time was hotter than of competing companies. And McDonald's failed, therefore, to tell everybody, caution, not hot, but caution, this is hotter than the hottest coffee you know. Moving over to another story. And for some reason, the screen does not advance. Robert, do you see the screen advancing?
Nope.
Okay.
Now it is.
Now it is. Okay. So the next case gives you a little piece of story about a paper cutter. In the time of identity theft, it's more important than ever to have a little paper shredder to make sure that your paper which you receive, which has confidential information, is being shredded so that nobody can steal your identity. And a 19-year-old kid decided to check out this cute paper shredder. Maybe the parents played with this paper shredder before. So the 19-year-old Madeline Thomas put her fingers into a paper shredder, and the parents were unable to get the fingers out. And at the hospital, the parents got the bad news that the fingers are permanently disabled, permanently severed, and cannot be medically or surgically reattached. So now the question is, do we have a liability for Staples, the paper company, who shipped this shredder over the internet? And again, the question is yes or no, do we have a liability? And at the end, you may already guess it, the parties came to a settlement. We do not know what the settlement is. We do not know what caused the settlement. But during the preliminary state of this lawsuit, the court decided that there is enough evidence that the shredder is dangerous. And based on that, the parties agreed to settle. What it is, we again don't know. But the takeaway from that case is that the risk was here that the kid could put the finger in. But of course, you make advertising, how many papers can be shredded at the same time? And this is a balancing game. How thick of a paper stack can be put in versus how thick a finger would be to get injured. At the end, we have a mixture, in this case, between a wrong design and a wrong advice. Wrong design because the product did have no safety mechanism which could prevent kids from putting the fingers in. So one way to make an alternative design could have been to have a certain clip, to have a certain clip to be closed, and it would only open if you disable it in a certain way, so that there is a way for kids to put the fingers in. This would have been a very small way of changing the design. The design would have been not much more expensive in the production. So the takeaway from this case is, if you can change your product using a little miniature innovation, a little something to make this product safer, it would benefit your risk strategy from not having to argue this case in court later. So let's talk about the fun questions of the airlines. Do you have any lithium-ion batteries in your check-in luggage? Because we all know, in the summer of 2016, where people were still flying, yes, I still remember the days when I know what an airplane is from the inside. Samsung was out of a sudden in the news, but not in a positive way. The Galaxy Note 7 was considered to be a dangerous product because in explosions, flights were scheduled, flights were changed just because of the danger of burning phones. And 2 different lawsuits were filed. 2 lawsuits are public. Daniel Ramirez and Jonathan Strobel, they had severe injuries. And we don't know at this time how this case was decided. Interesting enough, years later, we still don't know the outcome. But at the end of the day, it means, again, the product was inherently unsafe. A lot of times when I talk with my clients about risk avoidance, I hear that they think, well, you get a lawsuit for no good reason. And so far, I believe I have showed with you that we have a couple of good reasons why lawsuits were initiated. Because if you get a cut finger or if you have a burning phone in your pocket, this is certainly a problem. And those of you who are involved in the kids world, or those of you who are gamers, you may know Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a game which allows you to hunt virtual monsters in the real world. And starting in the summer of 2016, there were millions of Pokemon Go installations. And I wonder, in the current time when we have everybody talking about TikTok, whether we have some TikTok cases around when somebody is driving a car trying to imitate some of those TikTok dances. And I wonder whether TikTok litigation will be coming up soon. However, today the topic is the Pokemon Go game. And during the gaming, the Pokemon Go, or somebody was trying to haunt a monster, we had accidents. We actually had 2 men who fell down while they are playing Pokemon Go on a steep hill. Interesting enough, as of today, we have not seen any lawsuit filed against the manufacturer of Pokemon Go. And the reason for that could be discussed in detail later today, or whenever you feel discussing this with your friend, neighbors, or maybe you give me a call. Why do we see that there was no litigation filed against Pokemon Go? Because Pokemon Go implemented certain strategies that the game would not be able to activate it if you are driving in a certain speed. And it doesn't matter whether you are a passenger or a driver, because even if you're a passenger and you're telling the driver, go over there, drive over there, go there, it could well be that this is distracting for the driver. So therefore, the implementation of safety in Pokemon Go may have prevented any lawsuits filed against Pokemon Go. If you know of any Pokemon Go lawsuit which we have not been able to track on our end, let me know. I'd love to hear that. And if you send me a Pokemon Go suit, I'll be sure to return the favor in sending you a copy of my book. So the strategy of having the best advice is to have the best security, the best safety measures. That's a risk which you believe as a manufacturer will happen, is not made real. So whether you see on streets in the future, don't Pokemon and drive, don't TikTok and drive, or don't do whatever it is and drive, is certainly the case. A couple of days ago, we have heard that a Tesla driver was caught sleeping in Canada, and I wonder how this will lead into any future litigation at this time again. It is too early to say, but the best advice for you as a company, for you as a business owner is to have the proper warning labels and the proper strategy. So on a big picture, how do I avoid liability? What is my best method to avoid liability, and how do I get out of the personal risk? Let's talk about the 5, 6 takeaways, and here they are. Number 1, take good care when making your product. It almost sounds like an old tale, be careful. But if you can show later in court that you have the proper quality control, that you have the proper exit control, that you have methods installed which are state of the art, be it an X-ray system, be it some other imaging system, so that there are no microscopic fractures in the product which could be a problem later on, this will be a good way to get out of jail free. Number 2, look who's your partner in distribution, who's your business partner. Why? The more you can control who your business partner is, the more you know what their method of sales and marketing is. Number 3, is it better to produce in the United States, or is it better to produce anywhere else in the world? And if it comes down to a manufacturing defect, you may have an advantage if your production is in the United States. Why? Because out of a sudden, you have a whole array of not only witnesses available, but also you can convince a jury that you used American standards and that you're not subject to a certain foreign company bias, that you're using a standard unbeknownst to the American people. Number 4, if you see risks, you need to talk about it. Meaning, if you see that there is a product where a kid could cut their finger, label it and make sure that everybody knows about it. I am not a sales representative for insurance companies, and based on the list of participants I've seen before this webinar, a friendly shout out to my friends from the insurance industry. I know that you're around, and if you want to buy me lunch one day because I say buy your insurance plan, you're welcome to do so. But again, I did not say that because you promised me the lunch in the first place. No, but on a more serious note, to have product liability insurance is relevant. And here's one concern I have. I see with German Mittelstand, I see with German companies that they very often start to think about having a product liability insurance only when they knowingly export products to the United States. However, what we see more and more is an indirect, a tier 2, a tier 3, whatever level of manufacturing, where you are making a product which is then put into another product, and you have no way of knowing whether or not your product is really sold in the United States, or whether your product is just being used in a product for a different market. So it doesn't hurt to have a product liability insurance, even if you do not believe you have any American customer, because your product may travel around. We all know the book, The Diary of a T-shirt, where there's a very colorful description in this book how the T-shirt is shipped around the world a couple of times. So there could be a diary of your little gadget, which is shipped around in different products. And if it ends in the United States market, you may be better off in having a product liability insurance. And of course, talk to your advisors. Make sure that you are safe. Make sure that your labels are right. Make sure that your overall strategy makes sense. Often I have a discussion with my friends and colleagues about what is global. And often I have a discussion about what is international and what is an international standard. And here's a little spoiler alert. Not everything which you think is global or international is really truly global and international. If you look into the standards from the International Organization for Standardization, we see a global approach. However, in America, the ISO standard is not used. America has the American National Standards Institute, which results into different standards, different labels, different logos, different pictograms. And this is a contrast to the German Institute for Normung, which is in full compliance with the ISO standards. So if you see ISO and DIN is the same, and ANSI is unfortunately not the same. So be careful in which labels you use. On the good strategy of products is always to stick some labels on it. But I warn you not to warn too much, because if you overwarn, it may be confusing to your customers. So the first level of warning is the notice. Notice is along the line, it is a problem. However, it is not likely that there will be a serious injury. Then notice would conform to the American standard. If the product has the tendency to have a severe injury, use the word caution. And if the accident is likely to occur, or really likely to occur, or however you rate the likelihood, you may differentiate between caution and warning. And if the danger is then at the end deadly, it needs to be danger. So on the scale, you start on the lowest end with notice, you move over to caution, you move over to warning, you move over to danger. There is a German phrase of viel hilft viel, and in order to use that, you would be tempted to stick the danger label on everything. But again, this strategy is not the right one, because at the end, if you over-danger a product, the average consumer may not see what to do because they only see the danger labels. But sometimes a notice or a caution label may be the better way to label that. Let's move on to what is the strategy in case of litigation. And keep in mind that litigation means in the American system, everybody pays their own bills. So unlike the German system, where if you win a case, you get your costs reimbursed by the losing party, in America it means you have to pay it all. And joint and several liability also means that you are together liable with anybody else who is in this system with you together. Joint and several liability means if you sell the product to somebody as in an importer, somebody as in a retailer, or the retailer then sells it to a wholesaler, the injured person has the ability to check with everybody who touched the product, everybody who is in the chain of commerce, and everybody in the chain of commerce is jointly and severally liable. Even more, back to the idea from a couple of slides before, find your right partners. If you have the right partners, your risk is being reduced by just having the right partners. Let's talk about what are the best strategies if you are in active litigation. And it's always a question, is this litigation filed against you as a German parent company, or is this filed against you as the American subsidiary? And if the American subsidiary is filed, you cannot follow this strategy. But if the German parent was part of the litigation, just figure out, was it properly done? And we have seen cases where even in federal court cases, the lawsuit was not properly served on the German defendant. And as I mentioned earlier, once the lawsuit was filed, look into the benefit of going into a full-blown defense strategy, or take into consideration that you may want to have a negotiated settlement. And settlement would reduce your risks by having it under control. Also, that nobody knows your trade secrets. Part of litigation in America is that pre-trial discovery would force you to share company details, company secrets with the overall public. And therefore, maybe you want to protect your company secrets, and an early settlement may help you to keep the secret with you. Talking about strategy, as in, how can you tell the person who used your product did something wrong? And if you have an abuse or misuse of the product, you can clearly use this as a defense for your company. If the product was altered, if the company realizes there was a modification of the product, this could give you a good defense. And also, if somebody is using their own mind to make a decision and assumes the risk of the action, then the company may be in luck because the risk taken by the final user may supersede any manufacturing problems. Now let's talk about the improper use of a product, or let's talk about the alteration of the product, as those two go very often hand in hand. We see that cases are reported where company products are being altered in front of a running video camera. Everybody has a cell phone these days, and everybody is recording everything and loads it up to YouTube or to other providers. And kids of all ages manufacture products, change products, re-alter products, or do whatever it is to make sure that it's just a little bit better. And we've seen cases where engines have been changed for the better performance. We have seen that there are videos out where if you take this part away, then you have a certain faster turnaround. My big takeaway from that is, and my wish for you is, hire, for example, an intern during the summer to tell him your job is to serve the internet, and tell us where our product is being used by consumers, where our product is being used in a way which is not authorized by us, or share with us how somebody is making something out of this product. Why is that relevant? It gives you a chance to then make a counter strategy. And right now, courts give a liability for a company when the company should have known or knew that their product is made in a different way. It has never been made easier than these days to track down what consumers are doing with your product in the time of YouTube. And if you have the ability to get an intern running and have the intern to take a look at where your products are, this may give you a very good strategy to say, we fought against it, we made our own videos, we produced our own don't do that, and we informed everybody in the public how to stick with your original intended use. There is a federal agency out, which is Consumer Product and Safety Commission. And I would recommend to write down cpsc.gov as a website and look it up, because the Consumer Product Safety Commission tracks down unreasonable risks, tracks down risks attached to certain products. And if you have the thought that your products may be on the market and you don't know exactly how competing products have been grilled in litigation, take a look at cpsc.gov for some more background. In closing, letter openers sold may have an inherent risk. Letter openers sold may be very risky because they have a sharp blade in them. So staples, if you may realize this logo on the upper corner, which is conveniently covered by the picture of the product. Staples writes on the letter openers, cautions, blade are extremely sharp, safety, goggles recommended, and keep out of reach of children. So the product to keep out of reach of children is a good idea. In concluding, the question now to you. Do you have any questions? And if so, let's shoot them out in the chat and make sure that all of your questions are answered. The floor is all yours. Please type your questions out. And Robert, do you see any questions coming in?
While we're waiting on some questions, Reinhard, I see a statement from Doug Mitchell in the chat function. You want to take a look at that? It's kind of a clarification on something you said earlier.
Sure, my good old friend Doug, thank you for sharing something with us. So Doug, and I'm just reading it aloud right now to give a good opportunity for later, take a deeper dive. It is more difficult to purchase product liability policies for foreign entities without a US location and a US entity. In the past, we could find insurance companies who would cover foreign entity as long as there was a US address. The best approach is a global product liability program. And absolutely, Doug, that's a good point. It almost goes along the line where I said, consider manufacturing in the United States, consider to have a US location, consider to have a US entity. It not only may reduce your risk, but it also may give you a better chance for the insurance. Perfect. Thank you, Doug, for that.
All right, I have another one. What do you recommend when customers ignore the warning signs on a product despite them being there?
That's a good question. What do you recommend is certainly to make a training exercise for customers. And we have seen companies being rather successful, and this works primarily in a B2B, in a business-to-business environment, is to conduct a training session, to conduct live training so that you can document what happened on the site when your product is being used. In a B2C setting, my recommendation is only share the stories, share how it does not work, make your own video clips, upload your own YouTubes, share it over Snapchat, whatever it is, what not to do. At the end, the magic enemy is not necessarily your customer. The magic enemy you need to keep in mind is, what would a jury do? Because if the jury sees that you had a product which was wrongfully designed, wrongfully labeled, and at the end, nobody cared about it, the jury may keep you liable. But if you can share the jury, we made so many video clips, we made so many announcements, we shared stories, we told our customers what to do, then the jury is more likely to give you a free ride out of that than the other way around. So my quick takeaway on that is overpower the jury by over-informing the public, especially in a B2C setting.
All right, I see another one in the Q&A section. I'll read it aloud. What is the best strategy to get started with a product liability strategy?
That's a good one. What's the best strategy to have a strategy? So the best strategy is to have a strategy. So it helps to sit down with your US sales folks, with your engineers, with your lawyers to look into how can this product be made safer? How could this product be labeled better? And how can this product be designed better? And once you have this done, always keep in mind that product standards may change over time. So we recommend in the strategy step number 1 to implement a certain procedure. Step number 2 is to review the procedure, because at the end, a company is being tested on the question of, did they follow what is state of the art? Did they follow what is the best possible strategy to make sure that nobody gets hurt? And if you can document that your strategy is being revisited on an annual basis, the more likely it is that, again, the jury lets you get out of jail free. Brilliant question. Robert, if you have another question, let's raise that. Otherwise, I can pump the question out. What was one of my questions asked where I promised the right answer the person who is giving the right answer a copy of this book. So let's take this as a chance to make the drum roll for the winner, or the drum roll for the question. What is the number of percentage? What is the percentage of cases being settled in the product liability world? And I see the fascination of two folks almost identically responding. Jorge and Andreas, you are the two lucky winners. Oliver, sorry, it's 97, not 93. So your 93 is close enough for me to give you a copy of my book if you want it. And the other answers are unfortunately all wrong. And now I already spilled the surprise. So it's 97. So Jorge, Andreas, and Oliver, you are so close to that. You'll get a copy of my book. Andreas and Oliver, I know your address, but please ping me up as an email with your best mailing address. Jorge, please do the same. Good to meet you by this occasion today. Back to you, Robert. What are the next questions out?
All right, 1 second. The next question is, we have all of our labels in German and English. Should we have Spanish labels as well?
That's a good one. Spanish labels are, in my opinion, needed when you have companies who are selling to a market in the B2C world where you have predominantly Spanish speakers. It is a question again, see your imaginary enemy. It is the person sitting on the jury. If you are in a lawsuit in a county where a good number of people speak Spanish, it is likely that you have a Spanish speaker on the jury. So therefore, Spanish warning is of advice. I do see, however, a problem with Spanish labels these days that we see in certain societies in the United States de facto analphabetism, where people who grew up in a bilingual household speak Spanish, but they are not able to write and comprehend Spanish in a way how they should. So therefore, I recommend more and more to add QR codes or little pieces of links to a YouTube site or whatever it is, where you can make your warning videos in multiple languages. Why not have a warning video in the English language and then have subtitles in Spanish and in French? And if you have subtitles in Spanish, would cater to the southern United States community towards Mexico. If you have labels done in French, you would cater to the northern United States community towards French-speaking Canada. So while I can see a label being overburdened with too many different languages in, I also would recommend to find a way to include other languages. My final thought is, you may have seen that on drugs you buy in a supermarket, where you get a bottle of painkillers, aspirin, or whatever it is, where you have those little peel-off wrappers around. And the little peel-off wrappers are a good way for you to put a different language behind. So even though the product may be rather small, with a little peel-off label behind, you have a great chance to then put a different language behind that. So Spanish, yes, not necessarily required, but it's highly advisable. Robert, back to you.
All right, I have one more that I see, and this will be our last one unless anyone asks any more questions. But do you have any thoughts about the content of the manuals, how long or how short?
The length of the manual, in my idea, needs to coincide with the risk attached to your product. So if you have a manual for a soccer ball, I can see the risk much shorter than if it is a heavy machine. So length by itself does not really matter to me. What matters, however, is that the manual uses the best visible sites for the most likely risks. So if you stick into a dimensional front and a back cover, my ongoing advice is on the back of a product liability manual to write down the 5-6 main takeaways. What are the real risks? And use the backside, because we all know we kind of like judge the book by the cover, and we start down with the front and with the back. And if you are able to put the main risks on the back, then the inside manual could be 100 pages and it could be too short, or it could be 10 pages and it could be long enough. So while there is no page number, no magic page number, what I would say are two things. Number one, make sure that you use the space on the back, because it's an easy argument in front of a jury to say, hey guys, take a look at the back and this is what matters. And the second part is make sure that the language itself is easy to be understood, which means don't do too much technical language. Don't do too much jargon where you need a certain education or where you need to have a certain background of engineering to understand what it is. Make sure it is easy and plain and understandable. 5 words per sentence, 8 words per sentence, have it short and concise, makes for me a bigger difference than the real size of the manual. So it's about the content. And Jorge, I see you sent us the address. Thank you so much. We'll get it over to you. Any other questions?
Nope, that's all I see. So unless anyone sends any in the next couple of seconds, you can go ahead and wrap it up.
Perfect. So let's wrap it up. And certain attendees today were past members of the German-American Business Association real live in-person meetings. And yes, this used to be the way how the German-American Business Association conducted meetings. We as a board decided, and I give you my best regards also from Andreas Neumann, my fellow board member, we decided some time ago to skip our November series of live events as well. And instead we are doing every Tuesday afternoon German time from 4 to 6 for 2 hours, or on the East Coast time every Tuesday in November from 10 to 12 East Coast time. We do a series of 4 seminar type events like today, where our typical GABA friends would participate. We will have specialists from tax, from import, from logistics. We have friends from different parts of the insurance world. We go over to all the different experts which we typically pull together in the GABA seminar. And rather than getting live together in Munich in November, how we did it for the past 8 years, this year it is a virtual event. The benefit for you is you can pick and choose. And if you do want to get an invitation to any of those events, those of you who are members of the German-American Business Association or who are past participants or who are just friends or clients of Bridge House Law, you will get my newsletter and the updates for those webinars. If you are not on our newsletter list, reach out to me and Robert and I will be happy to send you the invitation for our events in November, every Tuesday in the month of November. And yes, the first day is election day, but we believe 10 o'clock in the morning, you're either done voting or you have enough time to do it in the afternoon. With that said, in the times of Corona, please, dear friends, stay healthy, wash your hands and whatever it is. I would love to see you again in person in the very, very near future. And until then, take care and thanks for dialing in today for the Bridge House German-American Business Association Joint Seminar. Take care.